Well, everybody wanted a very robotic Master Chief, and now you finally got to see a little bit of that on television. The question is it as stoic or as awesome as you wanted? This is my final review for Halo, the TV series, episode number 9 called Transcendence. This was the season finale from a very tumultuous and turbulent television show, one that I adored very dearly since the beginning. Obviously, being a Halo super fan myself, I know many of you probably watched this and said, geez, I don't know, is it going to pay off? Is it going to pan off? And well, that is up to you to decide. But I can tell you, I loved it. There's some really, really, really cool things that happened in this particular episode. There was a lot of combat. There was a lot of wrap up of particular characters, namely because they died. And there's also a lot of what's coming next. As with all of my other Halo reviews, this will contain spoilers. So if you have not yet gotten a chance to watch this episode or any of the other episodes, do yourself a favor and go back and check them out. I think they're worth it. Yes, they're different than the game. Yes, they're different from the books, but I think they're awesome in of themselves. So this picks up hot on the heels of the previous episode where McKee has now taken the artifact and is trying to flee. We still have the Spartan Mexican standoff in the hallway, and it is Keys of all people who comes forward and says, yes, everything you heard is true. Halsey did abduct you all as children. You all have been brainwashed to be perfect soldiers, and I am just as guilty as everybody else. That seemed to solidify the team. I think there was probably some doubt there already, but it was nice to see that we all have one Spartan team that's all back together once again. Another key thing here was we saw a little bit of comedy. There wasn't a whole lot of laughs in this episode, but a little bit of comedy there at the end, or about midway through the episode when they're all joking like, were you going to really shoot me? Yeah, I was, but I would have felt bad about it. So it's nice to see that the Silver team is now a cohesive fighting machine. And boy, they go into the heart of darkness, so to speak. They go directly right to the source where they are going to do their best to stop McKee and this weird ceremony or ritual, whatever, from occurring and from trying to stop whatever the Covenant is about to do. But before they do that, we had to see a really cool scene with Kai running the entire length of this runway, jumping onto Halsey's ship, killing off her creepy assistant by grabbing him and throwing him up vertically in the air and basically breaking his neck on the ceiling, which was awesome. And trying to detain Halsey. Of course, with Halsey, she's always got 15 tricks up her sleeves. The Halsey that they later rescue, of course, is a Flash clone. The real Halsey is now working with another group of people getting ready to leave Reach to continue her research on what she feels is the next level of human evolution. That will remain to be seen what happens there. Halsey has definitely been vilified in this, and I talked a lot about it in a previous Halo video. I did a book review of the Kilo 5 trilogy, particularly talking about how the author there, Karen Travis, really, really lays into Halsey very, very, very aggressively. I think we're seeing a ton of that here still in this show. Halsey kind of this, blank slate of just like, I don't care. I'm doing what's best because I know it's the right thing to do. Who cares about anyone or anything else? This is the right thing to do. I'll be curious to see people who did not like that book and probably also, I'm assuming, didn't like the show for a plethora of reasons. I'll be curious to see the parallels drawn between there. I appreciate that take on Halsey. I think it takes a certain type of madman, or in this case, a madwoman, to really kind of put your morals aside, assuming you have morals, essentially to push forward your ideology. And I'm curious to see where her story arc will take her. Clearly divorced now from the Spartans, from the UNSC, free to do whatever she wants to do. It'll be curious to see how she progresses down what the Silver timeline. So that's the end of Halsey for now. Moving on to the Spartan team, Silver team. They land. Nasty gunfight breaks out. During which time it's clear the Spartans are going to lose. Spartans show no fear, fight to the last bullet. There's some really, really, really cool CGI. I know there's a little jank in there, but I was so fanboyed out. My goosebumps were so high. I could barely see over my arm. I was so excited. But there's definitely some really, really intense combat scenes there. Really cool, like little Easter eggs when you're looking at the HUD, you're looking at the ammo counter, you're looking at the radar of kind of where the enemies are. You're seeing Mjolnir power failure. There are all these different diagnostics that if you're a fan of the game, you love it. And they had a very slight riff of the of that iconic da 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 da. You could hear the electric guitar playing when Chief is laying down, just getting beat to death and just fighting as hard as he can. Ultimately culminates in two really cool things. The first is this is the first time I can recall outside of the video games that we actually see Mjolnir armor get destroyed. They have that brute who's got his foot on Chief's helmet and is pushing down, and Chief's visor starts to splinter and crack, which was really, really cool, reminiscent of the Hunt the Truth from the Halo 5 Guardians advertising. Nothing to do with the game, other than we did see Locke punch Chief in the face, or was it a knee? I don't recall, but he did crack Chief's visor there. So we've seen Mjolnir get broken before, but very infrequently. So that just shows how powerful you had these brutes, and how cool it is to see Spartans actually being able to fight them. McKee runs up to the portal, because now she feels bad. She's been torn between two worlds. She's done a lot of flip-flopping, but despite her hatred for UNSC and the guard who hit her with the zappy stick, she still finds a way to love and care for John. And she grabs and touches the artifact, which sets off this massive explosion, knocking a lot of the elite and Covenant forces to their death, pretty much knocking out most of the main characters. And her and Chief are now in this alternate reality where it's this kind of else dimension. They are seeing the halo. They're standing on the ring. Still think it's Installation 04, but we don't know. And they're talking, and the only way to break her out of her trance after this perfect world that she's created for herself and John knows that they're still back on the planet. His physical body is being destroyed. His Spartans are dying. He knows he has to leave. Is Kai actually shoots and kills McKee. So Kai, man, took out two major characters this episode. I'm really proud of her. That's a Spartan warrior right there. McKee dies. The fantasy ends. John snaps out of it and just goes into full firefight mode again, realizing all hope is lost. Riz gets hit with a plasma grenade in her, like right in her, kind of like in her stomach, blows like a bunch of her guts out. Essentially, she collapses. It's clear the Spartans are about to die, and with his last sense of putting duty first, John tells Cortana, "Take over my body. I know it may be a one-way street. I know your original program was to take me over. Take over my body. And because you're the only person that can, if I touch the artifact, because he's the only Spartan strong enough now, the rest of them have been pretty much battered, beaten, blown up. Cracked helmet and all, gosh darn it. Sierra 117 is going to be the star of the show. If he touches the artifact, he's going to set off this weird reaction again, but he needs to get the artifact away. If Cortana takes control of his body, then his subconscious essentially is parked, which allows Cortana to grab the artifact, and that's what she does, but not before finishing off the fight. I mean, really finishing the fight. I even think he says in there, "Finish the fight." It was awesome. Such a throwback to all of great Halo scenes. I saw a lot of the Halo 3 reminiscent in there where the Brute's holding Chief up by his neck and he's kind of limp and dangling and, waiting for him to grab the plasma grenade and stick it. Remember the Believe campaign? I mean, this was basically a love letter to the Believe campaign. What was so cool and what I love so much about this is because Cortana is using the ship sensors, the other Spartan sensors, and everything, she's able to fight at a much more ferocious level than Chief could. And Chief is a master warrior. They're all master warriors. Any Spartan is a warrior. But Cortana, with that AI hook, is able to, dual wielding plasma pistols, shooting enemies, not looking at them, Then, in the ultimate fanboy moment, she calls down the goddamn Pelican. She's remote controlling, using the Pelican for strafing runs while she's shooting other enemies. Holy crap, that was awesome. What an awesome, awesome action scene. Of course, because now she's in control of such technology and everything, she is able to absolutely decimate the enemy. Chief is able to grab all of his comrades and the artifact and get the hell off the planet. The prophets are all standing there slack jawed. Everyone who's not completely eviscerated is staring slack jawed, and they fly off to go home, now with the artifact firmly back in the UNSC's possession, with really no hook for the Covenant to come back, because I'm assuming they're using the Cold Protocol going home. Covenant didn't even have ships on that planet. There's no way they can track them. We'll have to see where that goes. But of course, the flight home, that's when the other Spartans realize Chief is not taking his helmet off, and Chief is not talking. And Chief is doing everything very robotically. And he saves Kai by breaking open some sort of air valve and essentially welding her wound shut, basically cauterizing her wound with some kind of, using the flint, almost as his gun butt is flint, to spark this thing to basically burn a hole in her body to save her so she doesn't have any more blood loss. She's sitting in the front of the ship, and that's kind of where the show ends off. You know, they basically, Chief has become a robot. And that's why I started this review by asking, wasn't that what you wanted, everyone? Like, isn't this what we wanted? We wanted robotic Chief. And I'm hoping, and I don't think the producers have a way of like knowing how this is going to play out, but I suspect people watching that were probably like, you know, I kind of miss the old Chief that they produced in this show where he was talking and very robotic. Sitting in his helmet Chief is great for a video game because you're the Chief. You're in the first person view. You're fighting the war. All these wonderful things. But in this universe, well, maybe that's a slightly different story. I love this. I love this series. It's phenomenal. Obviously, I'm a huge lore nut of the games and the book and, you know, the true canon. But I think the Silver Universe has a great place in my heart. I can't wait for this series to come on DVD and Blu-ray. I want to watch it all again. I'll probably watch it all again 3 times before then. It was really, really good. A couple parting shots before I wrap up this review. The episode in of itself I thought was great. It leaves a lot to be open. We have a lot of exploration now with Cortana and John in Season 2. The fallout of the Spartans trying to figure out their place in the world. The fallout of Halsey. The fallout of Keyes, Miranda Keyes with Jacob Keyes. So there's a lot of good dynamics in place there. No Quan at all. Maybe she's gone. I'd be fine with that. I'd love to see Soren somehow get back into the mix. I hope his storyline isn't quite done. I'm glad they didn't cut away from any of that. So in terms of this episode, I think it did a phenomenal job. What to look forward to in the future? Well, everything I aforementioned, but there's so many other wonderful characters out there in the Halo universe. I'm looking at a survey right here on a website. Which Halo character do you want to see most debut in Season 2? We got Arby, we got Locke, the Gravemind, or any of the Flood, Spartan Edward Buck, Atriox, Sarah Palmer, Sergeant Johnson, just to name a few of some of the really cool characters that we have not yet seen that could be introduced into this universe. I would love to see more ODSTs. We haven't really seen much of the ODSTs here. I would love to see an ODST. I'd even take Buck as just an ODST prior to his transformation in the Spartan 4 program. Or just any ODST. It doesn't have to be Buck. It could be anyone. Just bring somebody in. Show us that other side of the conflict as well. I hope we stay away from Quan. Unless her storyline turns into something, I'd be totally fine cutting that off. Soren would still be interesting to follow for me, as long as he's back on the rubble and he's not in this Madrigal, which turns out to actually have been nothing. It was a total red herring. It had nothing to do with the artifact. It had nothing to do with Chief's saga, his rise, his fall, his discovery of truth, any of that. The whole Quan thing, just get rid of it. We'll have to wait and see what happens for Season 2. By the way, on the survey, even though I said Buck, I voted for Arbiter. I'd love to see Arbiter. Maybe how they include the Arbiter is he was involved on the ground forces. Maybe he was one of the guys on the planet, we just didn't see him obviously, who was in charge of protecting all of that war, and he ends up losing it, and the prophets then turn and make the Arbiter a bad guy. That would be a great twist. We'll have to wait and see. But I love this show so much. I'm so sad it's over, but I enjoy doing these weekly reviews with you guys. and continuing to fight the fight on the internet against the legion of trolls and haters who find everything wrong with the show. There'll always be a fan in it for me. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed my review. If you missed any, these are all in the playlist. Go back and check out anything you missed on the show. Until next time, no, you got to take care of yourselves. And then after you take care of yourselves, until next time, I can see you guys on the other side. Now go finish that fight. Take care.